I remember walking over to the animatronic department when they were doing the engineer's head that was all kind of like controlled through little motors and servos. Honestly, it's like being a kid again.
David, if you want to jump right in and let us know a little bit about Territory and what you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I co-founded Territory Studio 14 years ago. My background's motion graphics. I was a motion designer many, many years ago, much to the surprise of my team, because I don't think any of them have seen me using Cinema 4D or After Effects in quite some time. About, I don't know, about 8 years ago, I think I kind of turned myself into a creative director, and probably 6 years ago, I even stepped away from doing that. But I still feel creative. I'm creative by through my history of doing what I do. And the studio is really quite well known for doing interfaces, screen graphics, holograms, heads-up displays that feature in feature films. And we've worked on Marvel films. We've worked on Dune and Blade Runner and The Martian and various different alien films. So we've been very lucky with the projects that we've worked on in the feature film and TV world. And then we've also broadened it out into a lot of other industries and types of work. So we do a lot of work with live experiences, so like big shows, and we'll be doing projection graphics or LED. We do LED volumes for feature films, so virtual production and all that sort of thing. And we work on computer games. So we do trailers and cutscenes and cinematics and motion graphics for them. And we also have a digital team. So the digital team are doing a lot of work with the automotive industry. So the future of interfaces and digital experiences in cars. So, as cars get electrified, what is the kind of the screen experience looking like, and how does it change as you move towards self-driving cars? So we're across. I almost hate the question, what do you do? It's really, really hard to nail that one down. I prefer to show lots of pretty pictures, but yeah, we're working in lots of different interesting areas. We really pride ourselves on making the things that we do in house. We're designers and animators and developers, we make stuff. We make stuff move. We make stuff work, and hopefully we make stuff look beautiful as well.
That's awesome. And how do you think that coming up with these ideas across games and films, how do you think your environment is so important? Does that play a really important role in coming up with new ideas, the environment of the team? Do you change the environment per project?
So we don't change the environment per project. I guess so. Environment is just it's a constant thing on our minds, because coming out of the pandemic, we're all questioning that work environment status and what it means to us personally versus what it means to a design team or a creative team coming together, or a technical team coming together, versus what it means for a company. It's all shifting, isn't it? It's all really, really shifting.
Yeah.
But I would say that creative people in particular like to get into a state of flow and a real state of focus. And sometimes they need that isolation. So today I'm in my office, but there's very few people here, and I've got the room to myself, which is really nice doing an interview like this. Or I might want to spend time with a film script, or I might be spending time with some concept art from a computer game. You just need that. You need that deep dive time. But the richness of creativity and the types of projects that we work on are based on me learning from other people. I'm learning from my team around me, and I can't really construct that around a video call, if I'm completely honest. I don't know when that moment needs to hit me, and so I know that there's as much value in being in amongst teams, and hopefully my visibility to teams is also useful. They might not want me around so much, but I'd like to think that I'm helpful sometimes. And I was talking to somebody else more recently. I think that if we believe in the power of design and creativity, then we probably believe in the power of a designed environment, right? We probably believe that what architects do, what interior designers do, even when we're building live experiences, we believe in the power of design to change the impact of a mindset. We promote that idea to our clients, and therefore we kind of have to believe in that for ourselves. And so we believe that designed environments around us and our working environment does change the act of creation. I know that if I was trying to direct a video shoot remotely, that would be very different to if I was directing a video shoot in person with talent, with my team. And I think the same is true. I think the same is true of all creative activities. I love. I'm a big fan of jazz, and I love jazz bands and how they kind of look to each other for inspiration and find their next moment. And I feel like creative teams are a lot like that. They're listening out for the other things that are going on around them. And I think if a jazz band had to do their thing on a video call, it would be a little bit weird.
Yeah.
It'd be a little bit weird. So I see the benefits of both. It's funny, I was talking to Tom, my MD, earlier today, and we were chatting about this. And I said, I still feel like I'm sitting on the fence a little bit. I don't feel like I've given the team a full steer on where we kind of see the value in the studio environment and what we're doing and working on, and the curated tool sets that we have. Like we invest heavily in the hardware and the software and all that kind of stuff,
Right.
versus the remote aspect and the benefits of that. So I'm not sat here saying that I've got all the answers to that, but it's been a really good time to learn and listen around how much environment has an impact on what we're doing. Hopefully I haven't taken it too far off on a tangent in terms of answering your question, because I know you were probably asking more broadly about the creative environment. But to just kind of answer that, I think in terms of taking it away for the pandemic has made us realize how much we also miss it.
Yeah.
And so we're finding the balance between both.
Yeah, I think when you take something away like that, you notice how much maybe you need it. And I think it's hard for some businesses to get back into it because people like working from home. But I feel like as creatives, being together, like you said, the jazz band, it's like when you're together, things just flow better and you can like work off of each other. So I think as a creative, you have to have that like in-person experience.
Yeah, and it's knowing when to dial it up and dial it down. The problem is, because you're dealing with a whole series of individuals, and what works well for one person might not work well for another, there's moments where you have to step in as a studio and kind of encourage everyone to do it at the same time. Otherwise, it will just never happen, and it will never be quite right for any one person in the team. And that just puts kind of creative leadership in a not an awkward position, but just at a moment where you have to kind of call it, and you have to kind of say, look, on a Wednesday and a Thursday, this is where we're going to have to do it, because otherwise you're all going to miss each other. Some of you are turning up on Mondays, some of you are turning up on Thursdays, and you're just kind of crossing each other and not seeing each other. So we try and encourage it. Creatives don't like being instructed what to do and rules too much, but we try and create the chemistry that allows that to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a quick question about when you jumped into. You were saying you were doing video, VFX, and all that. How did you kind of jump into the car industry and start doing, the things that pop up on the screen? Do you have to hire a completely different team for that and like learn that industry, or because it's similar but it's different at the same time?
Yeah. So I'd love to say that I'm some kind of oracle and I've always seen this coming, but in all honesty, we've had interest in different industries and different skill sets for some time. So our first ever project was a computer game. We worked on a game cinematic for Electronic Arts. And so we've always been working close to game engine, either working with people that use it or using it ourselves. But we'd always use game engine in games. And then we'd always use motion graphics and visual effects in films. And then we'd always used UI, UX in digital products. And they were kind of teams within the Territory Studio that were just kind of fulfilling my interests in the creative fields to work in. And the world's just kind of headed in this direction where all of those things are converging. And I would say that we are now clear on our vision. We see where the world's headed, and we know that we need to have this multi-skilled team to deliver on where we're all going. So if you think about what might be coming through with the Apple Vision Pro, or where the future of automotive is headed, it's really layering digital and real world together. It's kind of bringing those two things, and so there's an argument for, in a team like ours in the future, maybe a product designer as like a physical product designer, or an architect working with a digital engineer or an AI engineer, and then a motion graphics artist. There's no reason why those three skill sets wouldn't come together, and that's really exciting for me. Like, I love the non-binary mindset. I think non-binary is kind of coming into our language more and more at the moment, and that kind of that overlap and that kind of interesting mix of skill sets and ideas and concepts is where this world is headed, and that kind of as a creative and technologist, that really excites me, because it's kind of is it Louis Pasteur or whoever, it's kind of like combining those things in ways that you just don't know what the end result's going to be, but you're just going to try it to see what happens. That happy accident is kind of what we've always dialed into as a creative industry, and I think we can apply that to our business models. The ways in which we work. I think we can mix groups up in really interesting ways to create interesting work on questions that haven't been asked yet. I often find that the interesting work comes from asking questions that haven't been raised, because it will always promote a really interesting answer. So that's where we try to come from in terms of why we build our teams in that way. I'm not taking full credit for being clever in building a company in that way. It's just kind of happened.
Developing the new ideas and asking questions that nobody's thinking of to bring up new ideas. I think, does that happen a lot within you making like future user interfaces? You have to think about something that doesn't exist. So how do you come up with things that don't exist?
It's funny. So things that don't exist come up a lot in feature films, because people want to, they want to have a unique point of view of the world. Normally a film director is committing 2 to 3 years of their life to something. They don't really ideally want to rehash old ground. So when they're looking at technologies or ways of interacting with something, and they're depicting that in a film, they want to find a unique point of view, and we want to help them with that. So more recently we depicted AI in the latest Mission Impossible film, and there's similarities to the depiction of AI before, but Chris McQuarrie was really wanting something that felt uniquely malevolent, evil, and calculating, that would kind of be a unique counterpoint to Ethan Hunt's character. So we often get these really weird briefs that wouldn't come up in the real world. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
A tech giant is not going to come to us and say, how do we make our interface and our AI look really evil and scare the crap out of people? Just, that is not going to come through. So the briefs that come from films are very fantastical based and very story based. However, they provoke ideas in an audience that are really interesting. And so when automotive companies come to us, or when tech companies come to us, they're saying, well, obviously not that, but there were some really interesting things in there. Can we talk about that a little bit? It creates a really interesting conversation that then turns into, well, it's obviously not this, but actually some of these things would be really worth exploring in a real world context. And we've actually got this technology now that can do some of these things. Can we explore how that looks, how that behaves, what kind of utility that's going to bring to the world? So I think it's about, I think through our film work, we show that we're passionate, interested people that know how to apply design and technology to some quite unique problems. And that just kind of gets mapped across to other industries that are coming at a similar idea, which is we want to look at world building. So world building in a film is, for Denis Villeneuve, electronic technology had a moment, and there was a global event that wiped out electronic technology, and we're going to a more analog type system. That was a world building idea that Denis had for Blade Runner 2049. And in the same way, we might talk to an automotive brand, and they might say, in 5 to 10 years' time, self-driving cars are going to be everywhere. How does that change the digital interaction that's going to happen, or the storytelling moments that are going to happen in car? So we start with world building, and then we look at stories, like human stories. How's a family going to behave in that vehicle? What are they going to be looking for? How do you keep the kids entertained for 2 hour drive when the car's driving itself? Suddenly, as a parent, I've got to look at my kids for 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
So the dynamics change, the world changes, then the stories change. And therefore the designs that sit within that, the experiences that sit within that, both in a film context, a fantastical context, but also in a real world context, need to change. And that's what I mean. I think by looking at, normally in a feature film, we're looking at dystopian because it's interesting.
Right.
And hopefully in the real world, we're looking at utopian. And like, how do we change things for the better? We've yet to have a brand conversation where they're trying to make things worse. They
Right.
they genuinely want to solve something because that becomes desirable. There's a commercial reality to that, but ultimately they want to move things forward in a positive way. So once we have those questions, those world building questions, we sit the stories within it, and that gives us a brief and a context to then set out our design work. So in both cases, the overall framework for solving a creative problem is exactly the same. It's just we're coming at it with different motivations.
Right.
Yeah.
When you're working on like a feature, or someone comes to you with a feature film, like you said, you were in Batman, Doom, working on those. Are you involved from the beginning of that process, before they even film anything, before they even really accept the film that they're going to make it? You're in from the beginning.
In some cases, yes, and in some cases, absolutely not. So we've been involved before a script has been delivered, and we've done research documents to kind of inform a project. Other times, well, more often than not, we're involved with art department. So art department are involved in pre-production. So there is a script, there is a notion of a story, but we are working with the production designer and often the film director to figure out how those interactions and technology is going to play out. And in the case of some film directors, Chris McQuarrie is actually really good at this. I'm sorry to name check him too many times, but he will update things as he's going along, and he'll shape things a little bit, listening to other people to like find the really interesting moments, and he'll shape it. So different directors, different producers, they all work in different ways. A production designer may not want us working directly into a director and producer. They might want to curate how they present that work to the higher up team. So sometimes we're part of those conversations, sometimes we're not, and then sometimes we're brought purely on into post. So everything's been shot. You've got like a working edit. You're seeing the shots that you're working into, and you're purely delivering design and graphic work against that. And that can also work really, really well when the director's had a really kind of clear vision, when they know exactly how it's going to work. They've already directed the actors in a way that delivers you exactly the performance you need for that design technology to play out. And the edit's not shifting around too much outside of their original vision. So a good example of a movie that we started really early on would be something like Swan Song, that's on Apple TV at the moment. There, Ajoy, the visual effects supervisor, and Ben Cleary, the director, just had like these really clear ideas around how the interactions were going to work, how the technology was going to be. We concepted it up, and then they actually had, I think they had like 3D printed models on set for the actors to kind of get a sense of how it was all going to sit, how it was going to be embedded into the environment, which is really, really clever. And then, so when we were working on the shots in post, it was all like as we required for our design work. So sometimes that happens, and in other cases it might be that they were running at things so quickly that they just didn't have time to involve us early on, and then we're working into post. But quite often, directors like Spielberg or Ridley Scott have such a clear vision from start to finish of what that film's going to be, that you're just kind of stepping into these perfectly structured shots to kind of, work into. So it totally depends, project to project, how that might work.
Yeah. I think it would be cool to do like a little jump backwards for some of the people in the audience where they're not at the level that your team is at yet, and they're trying to get to this like big level of working with the big directors and doing the visual effects on the big films. I think if we jump backwards to the moment, I believe Prometheus was like the big defining moment. Like, what is that feeling like to get that gig? And if you could run us through like where it went from there.
Yeah, so Prometheus, I think we were probably about 9 months, maybe 12 months into territory starting up, and I'd freelanced on films beforehand, so I think my credentials had been passed to the supervising graphic designer on Prometheus, a chap called George Simons, and he approached me to kind of work on some of the film. I explained that I was no longer freelance and that I'd set up a studio, and so we got to take on a good portion of the screen graphics work and a lot of the concepts and visuals that went on into post for that film. And so it was a call out of the blue, and I just kind of freaked out when somebody said it was a prequel to Alien. I mean, that was it. That you couldn't have said like a more dreamlike project for me.
Right.
And George and his team, we were working into set designer Sonia Klaus, and we had Arthur Max, who's Ridley's long-standing production designer. We were kind of reporting into them. And really, the wonderful thing about film, and actually the wonderful thing about that project in particular, other than working with Ridley Scott, was that you've got all of these different creative disciplines working into the film production. So you've got costume design. In the case of Prometheus, you've got animatronics, you've got visual effects, you've got the graphics team, set department, art department. You're all running at this creative problem at the same time. So you're looking at the words in the script and you're trying to decipher it, what that means for your own creative aspects, and we're all trying to figure it out at the same time. So you end up collaborating with everyone. I remember walking over to the animatronic department when they were doing the engineer's head that was all kind of like controlled through little motors and servos. Honestly, it's like being a kid again, seeing stuff like that. And you give them so much respect, and then they give you a 3D model of the head, and then you pull that into the screen graphics. And then I remember we did a lot of illustrated iconography design to go into the screen graphics, and then that shit got shared with the graphics team, and they ended up doing like big like vinyl prints to go into the actual set pieces as well. So there's a lot of this sharing of creativity in the environment the whole time. And jazz band again, you're all kind of riffing off each other and helping each other out, and it's great. It's great. So that's always a wonderful experience. I think Prometheus in particular, because it was my first time working with that director, and he has such a unique way of approaching projects, briefing in projects. It's obvious that he was trained as a graphic designer. He knows how to speak that language and inspire people through creative ideas. He has a great vernacular and way of motivating people and helping them see the potential in the project. So rather than telling people exactly what to do, he'll set you off on a tangent, which is quite special. And I learned a lot from that. Creative direction is not about telling people how to move things around. It's about giving them the environment around them, as we were kind of talking before, to do great work, and giving them a great brief. And if you've given them a great brief and they're genuinely talented and they've got all the tools that they need, they will do great work. They will just do great work. And you kind of just need then to get out of their way and just enable them as best as you can. So that was a great learning in terms of working with that director. And I would say that the lesson that I learned from Prometheus was just, if you get opportunities like that, just throw everything at it, give all the time in the world to it. It will pay off. It will pay off. I know that working hours can be hard in some of the industries that we work in. I've
Right.
always found that the hours that I put in, the effort that I put in, it always comes back.
So,
Especially
yeah.
opportunities like that. Especially
Yeah.
So
opportunities
I was
like
going to ask, because a lot of people when they do, especially something they love, like, did you price accordingly when you got that job? Because a lot of people, you'll work 10 times more hours and you're like, damn, like I'm really busting my ass here. Did I charge correctly? But again, that was essentially your first like really big job. So did you know how to price, or did you price accordingly? Right. Yeah.
No, that was a lesson in many ways. And it's always a lesson. It's always a lesson. I think as creatives, we always have a tendency to let our passion run away with us. And what we don't realize is it does undervalue the great work that you can do. So for me, it was slightly different. It was me and a couple of friends working on a project. It was fine. But I think as you kind of grow as a company and you're kind of looking after other talent that needs to be looked after and nurtured, you need to be really careful with how you structure projects, not just for you as a creative studio, but also for your client. Like if you're not bidding it in the right way and allocating time in the right way, it is fundamentally going to affect the quality of the work. So you have to be clever with that, and it's a push and a pull, because with more junior people, especially when I was working on Prometheus, there was a lot of inefficiencies in there because I just wasn't as experienced, you
Right.
know. And so I think it would have been, in some ways, it would have not been right for me to expect to charge the same financial amount to the client, because I didn't have that level of experience and expertise. I wasn't doing it as efficiently as maybe I would have done 5 years later. So so in some ways, I feel like we probably did price it right, or I probably did price it right based on the way that we were operating as a studio then, and yeah, I think it's funny looking back now. I think we're about 14 years in now. I think that as you mature and as you kind of get better at bringing on people that know how to do project management properly, and you bring in technicians that know how to do IT and render farms and all that kind of stuff properly, all that expertise added in, it does cost more money, but there's so much efficiency and quality raised there that it's worth it. I think all I'm saying is I think those economics kind of figure themselves out for them. It all shakes out in the end, or it should do. I think if you're behaving ethically, you should kind of get there. It's harder when you're going through a recession and stuff, and everyone's
Yeah.
just trying to survive. That's a slightly different ball game. But in a good time, you should be able to manage the project, manage the client relationship, manage your own team, manage your own time in the right ways. It's never easy. It's never easy because, I mean, especially for us, we're never really working on the same project twice. We're not really repeating ourselves.
Right.
So there's always an amount of educated guesswork going on when scoping a project. And you talk about it as a group as much as you possibly can to be as accurate as you can. But until you enter onto a project and you find out, oh, wow, this client needs to spend a bit more time kind of playing with things before they totally lock in an edit, or wow, this client's just like signing stuff off immediately, and we're running through it really, really quickly and just getting it immediately. Might be the client, might be us. I think we like to blame external factors, but sometimes it's with us, and it's us finding our way, and us not quite listening to things, or dialing into the latest technology to solve a problem when we're still working the same way that we have done for the last 5 years. So there's always a bit of give and take on that side of things. It's very easy for me to be zen about this because I am not really close to the projects right now.
Yeah.
and everyone that listens to this afterwards on my team will be wagging their fingers at me. But I think that's fair. I think that's a fair representation of how we do things.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, like as a creative or running a studio, you have to learn to adapt. You have to build the right team who also is willing to adapt, because that's a key factor. If you want to keep your studio running, like everybody has to know the same goal, and like also just be able to like bend a little bit when things change, because each client and each project is like completely different.
And let's be honest, as creatives, if I give my creatives a better render farm, you'll think, oh, they're never, like within 3 weeks they're using all of it.
Yeah.
If something becomes standard, creators will find a new way of making it more complicated and interesting, and that's what I love about them. But there's always this tension between, is it exciting or is it really stressful?
Right.
And more often than not, it can be exactly the same project. And on one project it's really stressful, and on another project it's really exciting. Funnily enough, it's normally more stressful on the things that you're less excited about. But
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I see that in some of the stuff we do too. It's like, I mean, when you get the new thing, the exciting new shiny thing, it's more exciting to work on, and you're excited to do it. And then if you've done it like a few times, you're like, all right, yep, we know this is what it's going to be like. Okay, cool. Let's do that one. Let's go after the new and exciting thing. And like,
you need to find that level of craft as well. So
right.
Repeating something over and over just it makes you kind of get really good at getting every little detail just right.
Right.
So it's always that kind of tension between originality and perfection of craft that I think we all struggle with as creatives. I don't think we ever resolve that. I think it's my notion, and I think it applies to my role as a business person now. I know that sounds incredibly dull versus a creative one. If you're a little bit uncomfortable, you're probably doing something right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's probably going well. I know it's discomfort, but actually, with exercise, it's the same thing. If you're pushing yourself to just beyond the limit, that's probably doing some really good work. And I think it's the same with creativity and ideas. If you're going slightly outside of your comfort zone, there's probably going to be some good work coming out of this.
Yeah, I think you have to stress yourself enough to get to the next point and like climb to the next level of whatever you're doing. And then it becomes
normalized, right? And then you don't think anything of it.
And then you're searching for the next thing that you're pushing limits.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's we've learned that through filming. Dan and I went on a little excursion not too long ago, and we did a 6-day hike backpack trip, and we documented these hunters in the wild, and we had never done that. We were doing like 10 miles a day, and it was uncomfortable, but we produced some great things out of it. So, and we learned a lot, and I think that's
I want to see that. I want to see that film.
Yeah, it's we're hoping it comes out this year. The client might hold it till next hunting season, but
we need some visual graphics with it, though.
Yeah,
we need to send you elks flying through the air.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, cool. I think the other thing that really comes to mind that I would like to touch upon too is just the future storytelling that you're doing. So it's like you're doing storytelling, but now you're like, you talked about the vehicles and the family using the vehicle a different way than the business person. It's like, how do you develop future stories and keep the thing, like, I guess keep the ideas fresh and like as futuristic as possible when it's only as good as your team can be?
Yeah, well, the thing about the team, there's a couple of hundred of us, so there's like thousands of different permutations.
Wow, so you have a couple hundred people at your studio?
Yeah, across the different offices.
That's
altogether.
Awesome.
And so, there's like however many billions of combinations of those people to kind of, so, and I also think it's lazy to let yourself off the hook and just say there's no original ideas. I think that's just you giving up at the first hurdle.
Right.
So you do have to get past the rubbish ideas, and the rubbish ideas are your first ones, 9 times out of 10. So don't be precious, I think, is the first thing. It's like, just let go. Get some stuff down, share it with everyone, accept it's going to be crap, move on. And then move on and move on and move on and move on. So I do think being fast is useful, because if you're fast at doing stuff, If you've just learned the tools and you breathe and it's done, that means you can get through 20 really rubbish ideas quite quickly.
True.
And you can then get to the good stuff. So I think speed and proficiency with tools is an undersung aspect of doing creative work. And I really believe in that speed. And I know that when we've worked with directors who work fast, it's because they know that you'll get to the better ideas quicker. And it's not about being rushed, but actually flow, or a state of creative flow, in part is accessing instincts. And, so I think that is part of the creative process, is kind of letting go and letting the back of your brain take over. So I find that's useful, and I just find that a wandering mind is really useful to that. So you don't always have to actively think on something. So what I often do, if I'm thinking about a creative concept, is I'll read the brief, I'll take it in, and I'll put it aside, and I'll do something else. I'll move on to the next project, because I know that my brain will solve it.
Right.
It won't give it to me right now, but I'll solve it. And I think that's one way of approaching it. It's the way that I approach it, and conversation's the other one.
Yeah.
So teams coming together and going full circle back. The amount of times I've sold something by just a random conversation with somebody completely unrelated to my project, but they're coming at it from a different perspective on another project, and they'll talk about something and they'll go, wait, say that again? And then that will totally spike a thought that goes through into the thing that I'm working on. So I think you can't control creativity, and therefore you, again, need to set up your own environment for success. So have you got lots of really smart people around you?
Yeah.
Are you surrounding yourself with the right sort of people? They might not fix your problem. I think environment, being around people, throwing things out, and just talking things through, it just helps you blue sky.
Yeah.
Find original solutions to things. But like I said at the very beginning, if you've got an original question, you'll find an original answer. So it's about not having the same questions more than anything. And that's what I mean about the brief. As a creative director, or as a partner, client, or whoever you are, if you're setting an original question, you will get original answers. If you ask a question that's been asked before, based on an insight that's been seen before, don't be surprised if you get similar answers.
Yeah, I would think that watching movies too that you haven't had a part of. I look back at one of my favorite movies is Iron Man, and the visual effects in that and the creativity is, I could watch it every day. I could watch that movie every day. But does that kind of like hype you up? And when you see a movie that you had nothing to do with, and then you're like, oh, like this could be better, or this could work in the project we're doing, or I could do something, a little bit better than that. Does that ever happen with you guys?
It does. I mean, the funny thing about Iron Man is it was done by Cantina, who are now part of Territory Group.
Oh my God! Stop it!
He just collects all the greats.
God.
This is awesome.
And those guys are amazing, absolutely amazing. And like you, fan of Iron Man, fan of a lot of their work. It's like, okay, well, I could set up a studio in LA, or we could join forces. And a lot of people joked online, it's like the Avengers coming together in the UI worlds. It's quite funny.
That's great.
Quite funny. No, they're amazing. So the film, I'm not going to keep talking about us and them. The film that inspired me was Her. I thought Her was amazing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I totally look at that and go, see, somebody else can come up with something that we'd never gone down that route.
Yeah.
And that film was definitely asking an original question.
Yeah.
That film asked the right sort of questions so that really unique answers could come through in the work. And I love that. Jorge, that works with us in the London office, he worked on Minority Report, and just that's kind of a seminal piece of work, really, in terms of almost inspiring things like the Xbox Connect and things like that. So
yeah,
I'm always inspired by other people's work. I think there's loads of great creative people coming at this, and and I think that's why we have to. That's why we have to work in other spaces. We can't just work in film, because I think that working in the real world, or working on computer games, or working with a car company influences a lot of our film work for the better. And I think a lot of our film work influences a lot of our real real world work for the better. So I think that's a really positive cycle that we've tapped into, and I just want that to, that is like the magic sauce for Territory. Working on the real world and working on the fictional world, and letting those ideas and those teams kind of like melt in the pot together is kind of really, really important.
Yeah,
I think that answers your question.
I feel like we see a lot of those two worlds like coming together now. Like we're in a time where there's like so much tech, and we're using it so much that like now this futuristic world is something we're like living in. So like fusing those ideas through your work is kind of like maybe becoming more of a thing now.
I mean, it's kind of getting mad. I'll be honest with you. It's easier to come up with ideas in the real world that haven't been done than it is in the film world. It's like the real world's almost ahead now of sci-fi.
Yeah.
You can do what with AI now?
Oh,
You joke?
AI.
I'm literally lost for what we can't do now. What
Yeah.
actually feels like it's 20 years away is probably 2 months away.
Right. And do you think that's like something, I'm sure you get asked about it all the time, but is it something that's helping your industry, or is it something that you worry about in your industry at all?
I mean, selfishly, at the moment, it's a source of a lot of work for us, because somebody needs to design that AI, and we're getting a lot of inquiries around. Okay, so I was at a talk earlier this week, and the panel host was like really into Kit from Knight Rider. It's
Okay.
like, can we have Kit, please? I think that the interface, I think as creators, we all when we think about AI, we think about ChatGPT
Yeah,
and Midjourney and all that kind of stuff, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. And honestly, as creatives, I think we'll be fine. I think if that's what we're running up against, then it's a democratized tool set, and we'll find our way forward. I'm not too worried about that. But the real power is like all the services and big data stuff that it can get behind, and it's going to build out so many opportunities. It's insane. Like some of I can't talk about it all under NDA, but some of the big tech conversations that we're seeing, it's like this is not going to take away jobs for creatives.
No.
This is going to create thousands of jobs
Right.
for creatives, and because suddenly we're not building locked in interface experiences or narrative experiences. They're kind of characters. You've got to design characters. You've got to design possibilities and frameworks and adaptable systems, because they're all powered by AI. So, and content can become non-linear now. If
Right.
you're using AI to power a real-time engine, like the potential there for story create, it's like multi-threaded stories. Like that's huge. That's huge. So I'm really excited by it. We're starting to see some really amazing projects come through because of this potential for tech companies and automotive brands and all the rest of it. And you still need to curate and design that. You still need to curate and design that experience. So I think there's massive potential for us as creatives to step in, because really, if the technology is democratized and available to everyone, it still comes back to, well, how do you create that point of difference then? And it's only going to be creative minds that can seed that originality for the different brands, so that they're differentiated, because otherwise everyone's got the same algorithm.
Exactly. Yeah. I think we are up on time with you, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Is there anything else you'd like to leave us with, or anything that is coming out soon from Territory that you'd like us to tell our audience about?
I don't think I can talk about anything that is soon to come out from Territory. I'll say that I think this is public domain. I think I can say this. I'm massively excited by Dune Part 2. I'd love to visually see how that all turns out.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to be releasing our showcase for the creators soon, so that will be fun to share with the world. And we are working on some very, very special computer game projects and automotive projects that I think will be coming out in the coming months. Yeah, I mean, it's really fun to see like all of these worlds converging. That a car could become an entertainment bubble, and a computer game can become, what already is, a non-linear storytelling piece. Yeah, all of this stuff's converging in really interesting ways, and it's been fun to be a part of that kind of like future gazing through films. But now it's really exciting to see how that lands in reality. So I think that's a great, that's a great part of the puzzle for us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank
Cool.
you, David.